Hey everybody, thanks for watching Be Better Golf. I am here today in Long Beach with a quick story. One of you guys, Ravi, had said, hey, have you seen the pause and throw training aid? This is it. And I was looking at the pause and throw training aid's YouTube page, which is linked below. And I was like, I recognize that place. It was at the golf course, Recreation Park, 2 blocks from my house. And the inventor lives here in Long Beach. His name's Phil Reed. Phil, good to see you.
Good to see you. We're practically neighbors.
I know, just really 4 blocks apart. Phil invented this, and he's also the almost like de facto biographer of Mike Austin.
Yeah.
Mike Austin, let's just assume, because I think only a couple years ago I had no idea. Somebody that knows absolutely nothing about Mike Austin. Who was Mike Austin?
Well, Mike Austin was probably the longest hitter that's ever played the game of golf.
Okay.
He's in the Guinness Book of Record for hitting a 515-yard drive during a tournament. So that's sort of what sets his record apart.
Right.
It was during a tournament. The other thing that's very interesting is he was 64 years old. It took place in the 1970s, and he was swinging a steel shaft, persimmon head, and one of the older golf balls. So when you put all those things together, it makes it like longer than you would see today by the pros, by far.
And along with the records that he, and then there's a lot of other stories about Mike hitting it long and gambling and all other kinds of very, very interesting characters.
He was a very colorful character, yeah.
He died in 2000.
He died right around Thanksgiving in 2005, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was 95 years old.
So the era that Mike existed in was more of you could make more money gambling than you could playing tournament golf.
Right.
So a lot of guys wouldn't even turn pro because they wouldn't want anybody to be led on to that they were good golfers. But Mike was a pro and played a lot of tournaments, huh?
Yeah, he did. He played particularly as the senior tour was getting going. And in my book, I talk about how when he set the drive, he was actually playing with Chandler Harper, who was quite a notable golfer in his own right.
Okay, yeah. So the physics of that 515-yard drive, I know there was a 20 or 25 mile tailwind, so helping wind, but can we kind of reverse engineer what was happening at impact? Like, what do you think the club head speed or ball speed was? And like, what do you think was going on that made that drive happen?
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, somebody else picked up the book and they contacted NASA and they got the weather data and all that stuff, and they said, what would it take and was it humanly possible to hit this drive? And they kind of crunched all the data and they said, yeah, if it all came together, you could hit it 515 yards in those conditions.
What do you think, was the club head speed like over 140 or something maybe, or?
Mike, so back in the day, I said, what was your club head speed, of course, and he said it was 150 miles an hour. And I said, well, they didn't have radar back then. See, Mike was always disproving me, so I'd think, oh, I caught you in a lie. So he said what they'd do is they'd put you in front of a board that was divided into quarter-inch segments and then use a stroboscope so you could see how fast the club was traveling. And it was tracked at 150 miles
So if you were here at this point in time, and we know that you were here, and then you were here at this point in time, we can tell.
Because you know how fast the strobe lights flash.
So that makes sense because Joe Miller is now at 150, and he's actually just put up a challenge to himself to get to 160.
Yeah.
And Mike was, throughout his life and even into his 60s, was a physical specimen. I mean, the muscles that he had, and he was tall.
6'2", 210.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, a lot of these things, they sound like these outrageous claims that couldn't be true, but then the more you dig into it, you're like, well, yeah, I guess it happened.
No, well, in the book, I actually found Chandler Harper. He was in his 90s, and I sat with him for 2 hours and talked to him about his career. But then at the end, when he was warmed up, I said, well, let's talk about Mike Austin now. And it was clear that he didn't really like Mike, but he verified the record.
He has to give it to him.
Yeah,
it happened.
Because they had to pace it off, and so it went over the green. The green was like 465 yards, and it was past the green, and he said, and I even took big steps to pace it off.
Right. So they, the interesting thing about it, when you hear about the 515-yard drive that Mike said, that Mike's wife said, was that it was like any other drive, extremely fast, but it had some kind of element to it that it just didn't fall out. Usually a drive it goes, has this parabolic curve, flattens for just a second and then comes down. This one it flattened and it just stayed flat and stayed straight.
Right. Chandler Harper said he had already hit the ball over 400 yards, like 4 times previously in that round.
Yeah, he was killing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it all came together in a way.
Yeah.
So then let's talk a little bit. We'll get back to Mike and his swing philosophies, which you got to spend some time with Mike, huh?
I did.
Okay,
I
that's
spent
cool.
a lot of time.
How did that come about?
Well, you know, you think these people are inaccessible, but I found him in the phone book. I called him. He was very gracious. He had this wonderful sort of Scottish Southern accent. And he said, come on over. So I went over with a couple of friends and talked to him. And I found him to be really very difficult.
Yeah.
And but I had this friend down in Texas, a big golfer. He says, you got to write a book about this guy. He's fascinating. So ultimately, I wrote an article for the LA Times.
Yeah.
And it got such a strong response, I was able to sell a book contract.
Okay.
And then go ahead and write it.
Which is called?
In Search of the Greatest Golf Swing.
Okay.
And in it, what I do is I asked Mike to teach me to hit the ball over 300 yards.
500 would be a stretch.
Yeah.
So years later, maybe, there's this, which is the pause and throw. I'm going to put it on.
Yes.
Tell people, now this kind of jives with the Mike Austin swing, is that right?
Yes, well, in later years, Mike decided that he wanted to produce a swing where the club head was always squared at the target line, even when you take it back. So instead of fanning the club head open, like
so let's
a
say
lot
like
of people
traditional
do.
instruction is
Yeah.
toe up to toe up. On
Yes,
the other
exactly.
Side.
You would almost feel like you're curling under. So you're up here, now you're flat at the top. And you see a lot of the pros, like Dustin Johnson, you were mentioning, is flat at the top. And he's well, flat or even slightly bowed in this direction.
Okay.
Whereas conventionally, they would say be cupped and point the club shaft down the fairway. So the thing is that if you're cupped here, you can't bring that back to impact. But if you're bowed and you make a good weight shift, you're square.
You can just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more accurate.
So basically, like in my right hand now, I cannot do this thumbs up
Yes,
position.
right. So it keeps you from going up here and then, okay, so the instinct is I want a little more, so I'm going to go like that.
Yeah, right.
And it keeps you from doing that.
Yeah, because a lot of times, especially in my own swing, I'll see that I'm good, and then I kind of do an overswing right here, where it's just like a wrist folding.
Yes.
And then I actually have to kick it out, and I call it a wobble. I have to throw it this way in order to get it back.
Right.
So.
And the less that you have to do in a golf swing, the fewer compensations, the greater chance that you're going to be more accurate and more consistent.
Today we're filming at Skylinks, which is convenient for me, and I've done some Be Better Golf Schools here with some of the pros on the channel. But I forgot that there's a helipad right there and an airport right there. So. Yeah, and there's been some research that has come out recently, especially from Australia. This guy, Dr. Sweeney in Australia, has been putting out some stuff where he's got sensors, and I'll put pictures in, all over the forearms and the wrist. And they can see that the most active thing in the entire body of the golf swing is, I guess this would be deviation, right? Ulnar deviation. And the most active thing is this flexion and extension of the right wrist.
Right, so it takes out one movement, which is this.
Yeah, you can't, so really the left wrist's job is in some ways to do this.
Right.
And the right wrist is to do this and to this. And on all the graphs of all the different things, a bunch of different papers keep describing right in this area here on the way back down, they call it a forearm burst here. And it's like basically this is happening.
Yeah.
And it's even beyond just like a freewheeling thing, but the muscles are lighting up and it's helping it. It's getting it through.
Now, what's really interesting is that when you put this on, you sense that you're now more restricted in a sense.
Yeah.
And so then most people find that it triggers a sensation to use your body more, which of course a lot of average golfers don't do. They swing with their arms and they don't make the shift. So people begin making a better shift when they put this on. It wasn't our intention, but that was.
So I'll hit some with it just because.
And unlike other training aids, you can hit balls wearing this. It's not just to give you the feel.
This is a 7. Usually people start with like a wedge, huh?
It's probably a good idea to start with a wedge. It's also a good idea, particularly it depends on how much it's changing your swing. Like you're a really good golfer, so it's probably not changing your swing that much, but it's a little reminder for you. But for some people, it's going to be a big change.
Yeah, you're going to feel
start
crazy.
slow.
Yeah. The place that I feel this the most is right here, because I'm used to twisting and throwing like this.
What it's trying to make you do is go up rather than over. And if you see, like Hogan, the longer you can keep your club on line, the more accurate you'll be. And that's what Hogan is trying to do when he has that really high follow through.
Like this?
Yes.
Yeah, because he'd be real flat here and then...
Yeah.
Okay. Let's...
So
yeah, the release feels cool. That's just a dead straight 1 yard fade.
Yeah. And what's good about it too is that you can, with it on, you can kind of feel like you can be really relaxed in here and let the club almost move naturally without really forcing it.
Yeah, one of my most watched videos with Monty Scheinblum, friend of mine, an instructor, was called the no turn and cast. People that would get in this position impact, they would actually end up getting in this really great impact position, shaft leaning forward, off the left leg, everything like that, by feeling this as hard as possible.
Right.
It's so interesting. Now tell me a little bit about, as I'm hitting this ball, tell me a little bit about Mike Austin had this term that he would always use, like everybody's swinging under, over, down, through, and I'm swinging, what is that? Just tell people about that, because I didn't, in your book that I read, I just didn't get that part.
Well, Mike's, probably the secret, or one of the secrets of his distance, that was a nice ball.
Yeah.
Most, even pros and everything, are coming, out, down, and across, okay? Like almost everybody here on the range, you'll see them finish like way over here.
Yeah, swinging.
Not like up here. So Mike said,
rather than out, down, and across.
Out, and up.
Down,
and it was
out,
like
up.
3 different words, out, down, and across, down, under, and up. And I thought, that's a really big difference. And if you watch the videos, you'll see that
the videos of Mike hitting?
Mike and Mike Dunaway, you'll see that he's really firing the ball like out here.
Yeah.
He really, like you were talking about that push, he would get in just the right position and then really just fire the club like that.
So it's down, out, and up.
Yeah. So the down is really provided by the weight shift, and then once you got inside, then you would be under and out.
You mentioned a name there that I've kind of keyed into about a year ago. I wish I had about 5 years ago, but Mike Dunaway.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, because I'm usually kind of skeptical about following swing ideas that are like linked to like the way one person did it, like Mo Norman, for example, like an amazing ball striker, probably one of the top 3 ball strikers of all time. But that's what he did. I don't really know if that can even be emulated, especially like his personality was just perfectly suited to practicing golf, I think.
Yeah.
And but the thing that makes the Mike Austin method kind of interesting to me is the Mike Dunaway story.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about who Mike Dunaway was and how he ended up meeting Mike Austin.
So Mike Dunaway was actually a former college football player, and he blew out his knee, and he decided he was going to drive to California in his VW Bug and meet Mike Austin. He showed up at the range, knew nothing about golf.
Really?
And said, I want you to teach me to be the longest hitter in the world.
So how did he even have this desire to be the longest? He had hit balls a couple times, or?
He was looking for, the new sport.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
He figured, I'm an athlete. He was built like a brick house.
Yes.
So he figured, I'm an athlete, I see the guys on TV. That's not very athletic.
Exactly.
If I got into it and really put my effort behind it.
Yeah, and he wanted a teacher. So Mike took a look at his swing, and it was terrible, but he said there was something about the explosiveness of the way that he was swinging the club that he said, I want to work with you. A couple of years later that he won the world's long drive championship in Japan. And he was eventually sponsored by Callaway, Mike Dunaway.
So and then Mike became, he also kind of had that same spirit that Mike Austin had, where Mike put this challenge out on, I think, Golf Week magazine. So the $10,000 challenge. He said, hey, anyone in the world seeing this, if you can outdrive me, I'll give you $10,000. Is that right? Anybody ever take him up on it, or? I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't remember specifically. I know that Mike Austin was constantly being challenged.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that was interesting, because I considered Mike to be a big, strong guy, was he said whenever really strong guys came,
Yeah.
he said, I knew I could beat those guys all day long.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to use their brute force.
Yeah.
And you see that on the long drive today. Those guys really don't have golf swings so much as just brute force. But he knew that he could beat them all, and he did.
So what was Mike Dunaway, through the teachings of Mike Austin, doing? Especially, what was that? It was the very kind of old school, strange looking move that is like, what is that right leg kind of dropping?
Well, you know, a big thing is that some teachers will say, you know, turn the hips.
Yeah.
And there used to be the phrase turning in a barrel. He was probably the first person that used the term leverage. And now we hear that all the time. On you know, the analysts on TV.
Yeah.
And so his idea was that the hips had a completely different function, which was that they swung like this, and then this leg would drop, so the hips were going this way, and then of course the upper body followed, and the club would be sort of slung through the hitting area. So it wasn't like I heard Tiger once interviewed, and he said, you know, I twist and then I fire my hips. So basically you're driving your hips against a taut back. Okay. And I remember with Mike Austin.
Yeah, that's kind of like the modern way.
Yeah, and Mike said, he's never going to last. This was like 10 years or 15 years ago. He said, Tiger's a great golfer, he's never going to last. And now, you know, he's had all these back surgeries. So it actually saves your back, because this whole unit is moving as one. It's not twisting against each other.
In some great swings, it really looks, it's much more of a tilting.
Yeah, well, he said his hips tilted up, out, and then turned.
Okay.
So the turn was just on the follow through. But the power generated was like a bell. Okay. That was swinging back and forth from a stationary point.
What does that mean, a bell?
Well, it means that it's swinging rather than turning. And the bell.
So like the what do you call that? The striker inside the bell.
Yeah.
That's swinging this way and swinging that way.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I think, and if you look really closely, well, first of all, I want to say that if you look at Mike Austin's swing on a video, it's a beautiful swing.
Yeah.
It's not some sort of weird, well, like Mo Norman, his swing's pretty weird looking.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful swing because it's so fluid. Mm-hmm. I mean, in fact, one of his other big things was that he never held off on the club. So the club started moving up here. And if you time it correctly, it's got a lot more speed when you get it here.
You got to put everything back in.
Yeah, that you take out.
Yeah, so what was that about?
Well, really, I think that he felt that the downswing, you know, was almost just the opposite of the backswing. So rather than being one of these guys that said, well, you have to go straight back as far as you can, then up, and then really close like this.
Yeah.
You know, his was like, this leg moves, and then on the downswing, that leg moves, and everything happens automatically. Because, I mean, the more things that can happen automatically without any kind of thinking or adjustments, the more accurate you're going to be and the more fluid you're going to be.
So then also, like, Mike would talk a lot about the right arm and throwing.
Yeah.
And I saw this piece of old video that you and I have talked about where Mike has the club in his right hand and his left arm is doing nothing. I saw one video where he just had the sweater sleeve like this and he was just swinging it and hitting it.
Yeah.
But then another video where, or maybe it was a rope or something, and then another video where he had a rope on here and then a rope tied to here, and he takes it up here and he throws the club completely. It goes out of his hand, hits the ball perfectly, and then it freely swings here. And so from about here, he's not holding it.
That's right.
So that was like a trick shot exhibition he did, but what was he also trying to tell people when he would do that?
Well, he used to say that when he got to this point in the golf swing, the club was gone. He was no longer controlling it. So all of the key motions that he made were up here. And then right in here, it was just a matter of letting the club go. And so with the rope around it, he kind of threw it here.
Yeah.
And then the rope would continue turning and wrap around.
So the club was totally freewheeling at this point.
Yeah, right.
Which makes sense because from a motor control point of view, from what I've been seeing, we basically have no more control over the club to about here-ish. Then it all happens way too fast to be able to know what happened and do something about it.
Well, it's too fast Plus, it should be automatic
Okay.
because you can't control it. Like you can't say, well, on my last swing I did this, so this time I'll do this.
Yeah.
So Mike would always talk about you have to pre-think. You have
Okay.
to think before you swing. You can't think during the swing.
Yeah.
And that lines up with almost every other sport, which is your mind really needs to be clear when you're performing whatever action it is.
So not to spoil In Search of the Greatest Golf Swing, right?
Right.
Not to spoil In Search of the Greatest Golf Swing, but your goal, you were hitting at about 210 or so when you saw Mike?
Yeah, I had kind of a weak slice, about 220 was sort of like a long ball for me.
Were you ever able to, you had a 300-yard goal. Were you ever
Yeah.
able to actually do that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow, that's
a number
really cool.
of times.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
I also, well, Mike collected a little group of people, one of whom was Jacob Bowden.
Yeah.
And Jacob took lessons from Mike and from Mike's protege, Dan Schauger, who's
Mm-hmm.
written a couple of books. Anyways, he went on and he had a 400-yard drive to win a long drive competition.
That's awesome.
Jacob. And Jacob was built just like Mike. It was pretty interesting. Anyways, I worked with Jacob and he had a lot of swing training.
Like Mike Dunaway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jacob said, take a month and do these exercises, and they were all for fast twitch muscle development.
Jacob told you to?
Yes.
So give us some examples of the kind of exercises you were doing for speed.
I used a fan club, and I also used the resistance things. So he had me like get a resistance band and go to like 3 positions in the downswing. So pull and hold, pull and hold, and pull and hold, for 10 seconds each
Oh,
one.
and hold it.
Yeah.
Rather than just pumping, just actually hold it right there.
Yeah.
Hold it right there. Hold it right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, but the key was, after a month, so I was clocked at like 85 miles an hour, but then on the range, I hit 116 a couple of times, speed. And but the key was, Jacob said, to hit it far, you just have to trust it and let it go. So he said, take a round of golf, and he said, just hit it as hard as you can. Don't worry about the score.
Yeah.
And we played at Rec Park, and I hit, I think, I still have the scorecard, like 4 or 5 300-yard drives in that round.
That's great. At 5'9", 5'10"?
5'9", yeah.
That's very good. That's very good.
And I was also 60 at the time. A lot of business that Jacob gets is from older golfers like me who want to get their distance back.
Yeah, I've seen his articles. Yeah, he likes this as well. He sells this on Swingman Golf, his website.
Yes.
That's very cool. All right, well, let's see it. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on now.
Yeah, so what I'm
Phil.
working on now is trying to get the club down in here. I had the tendency, and I was watching videos of going out, and then if you get out here, you've lost a lot of power.
In your backswing?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I had to do all kinds of adjustment. So, one of the things Mike would do is he would do a slight forward press and then just go all the way back without any more hand action.
Yeah.
He talked about presetting the wrists. So he would hold this and then go like that. Another way, and what I've been doing lately, is just to take the club slightly inside. So when you're here, and after your shift, you can really come through like that.
Yeah. So let's see, hit one for us.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I do is I try to take the hand action out almost completely, and that's why the possum goes a good thing for that. So you can move the club a long way without really changing this.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Mike Dunaway talks about, this is a 7 that needs to stay together through hitting the ball.
Yeah.
Like that.
It's interesting.
So.
Or good structure.
Yeah. So this is a pitching wedge.
Oh, that's pure.
So not real accurate, but
No, that's about. I think you might have an alignment issue because that was about where you were aimed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's really cool, Phil. So we'll do some more stuff with Phil. Hopefully, I can get him out on the golf course. We'll do a little vlog or something.
That'd be fun.
In our neighborhood.
There's a lot. There's so much to be said about all of this, and I feel that golf is like this incredible mystery, where given all the scientific data we have, they still haven't really figured out what works and how to teach it.
Well, everybody is very deep today in, so sensors everywhere.
Yeah.
They're very deep into what happens, but very, very confused on how to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy at our local course that that said this phrase to me that I thought was probably the best phrase I ever heard. And I was telling, well, I'm trying to do this. He's like, you're confusing what happens with what to do. And those two things are totally different.
Right.
How do you think, because I know you've researched this a lot, I feel like sometimes like there's this new thing I want to put into my swing or whatnot, and I feel like training away from the golf course and away from the driving range just doesn't bleed into my swing, because as soon as then I go to hit a ball, it's just automatically what I've done. Even if at home I've been working, say, for example, on this first part of my takeaway a million times, and then even in my practice swing, it'll be great. But then when the ball's there, it's something totally different. So how do we get that stuff we're working on into the swing, do you think?
Well, first of all, you have to understand it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
And you always go back to your comfort zone. So like when Jacob said, don't worry about the score, just hit as far as you can hit it, that was very liberating to me.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think if you're trying to do something new, you have to be realistic. Like I had this new motion I was telling you about, and I went out and played the other day, and I was hitting the ball really well, but my putting sucked.
Yeah.
All of a sudden my score's bad, so I figure like, well, that didn't work. Well, I went back and reviewed it, and the stuff did work. I was hitting it the way that I wanted to hit it. I just didn't have the other parts of my game.
Well, I don't think we're going to get everything in today that I want to talk to Phil about. But one thing we are going to do a video about right now over on the putting green is you were friends with a guy from Long Beach as well who died, I think, just last year?
Oh, Dr. Tom, yeah, he died last year,
Yeah. So Dr. Tom was a Guinness World Record holder in the free throw, and you wrote a book on free throw shooting that actually Shaquille O'Neal had, and a lot of NBA players who were struggling would get this book, and Dr. Tom co-authored it with you. He made 2,700 and some
and 50
and
in a row, and
50
never
in a row,
missed.
and without missing.
Yeah.
And probably could have made over 5,000, but they shut the gym down that day. There's such similarities between putting, let's say like a 10-footer, and a free throw, aren't there?
That's why I got into it, because I was into golf, and then I read about his record, and I called him up and I said, you know, anybody who can make all those free throws can tell me how to make a 4-foot putt anytime.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that on our next video. You got to be subscribed to see it. I'm going to give away a t-shirt right now too. So anybody who watched this far, just put the words "Big Boom" down in the comments, and I'll know, and one of you guys will win a t-shirt. If you're subscribed to the channel, you put those words and you hit post notifications, I will send one of you guys one of those t-shirts. You can learn more about Phil on Facebook if you type in Philip Reed Writer, I think, something like that.
Yeah, author.
Philip Reed Writer, author, and then you can check out his book. The pause and throw, we're going to do a thing through Be Better Golf before I put this video out, so you guys will see there'll be a special free shipping offer and a special discount, I think, too, for a pause and throw to get you, if you guys are interested in this, because I think it really helps, especially if you find yourself kind of flipping and twisting around, get a lot more stable through. All right, Phil, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was fun.